If you're going to be in an intimate relationship with someone who can match your healthiness, your emotional maturity, right? When he does what he says he's going to do, when he says he's going to be there at a certain time and he shows up, when he says he's going to call and he does, it makes her feel like she can trust him. And when she can trust him, it says he's loyal. He's a man of good character. He keeps his word. He does what he says. For a woman to feel safe with a man, she's got to have a man that does what he says, who pays his bills on time, who takes responsibility, who goes to work even when it's hard, even when he doesn't feel like it.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nikki Ballou, and we have a very special guest for you here today. Only the third ever woman to be a guest on the Sovereign Man Podcast, Daniele Hage. Welcome to the show, Daniele.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Good to have you here. So, Daniele, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your story? How'd you come to be a woman who's got a podcast and who's a champion for men?
Well, I've always liked men, but here's the thing. Honestly, I don't, a lot of women have been hurt by men, and I get that. It's like, I think 1 out of 3 women by the time they're 18 have been molested these days. And, I had really good experiences with most all the men in my life. I had a good dad. My parents were divorced, but he was a decent, wholesome man. Never, I haven't been molested, raped, abused. And I know that so many women have struggled and been hurt by men. So I understand why a lot of women, especially the whole feminist movement, the man haters, and not all feminists are man haters, but I was kind of going down that road that, I used to write in high school and college papers on equal rights amendment movement. And I probably would have gone down that road just because, although my dad was not a bad man, they were divorced. And my mom used to always say to me, make sure you always have something to fall back on. Make sure you always have something to fall back on, like get your education, get a job, be able to support yourself, because she didn't have anything to fall back on, although she is the one that divorced my dad. And so then she had to, get a job, and she had 4 kids, and it was really, really hard on her. So that little videotape, that recording was always playing in my head. And I thought, I'm not going to get married till later in life. At that time I was young, and I thought, not till I'm 25 plus will I get married. And so I was going to school and going to college. And then I met my husband first, before I met him, I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart. And I was a Catholic, raised a Catholic, but I knew all about Jesus and believed that he was the Son of God, but I didn't know him personally. It's like Oprah. We all know who Oprah is, but not everybody knows her personally. And that's how it was with me and God. So I got saved, and right away met my husband. Shortly after that, somebody introduced us, and he was going to be a pastor. He was very young. He was 21. I was 18. And he was going to be a pastor, and I didn't really even know what that meant. I didn't really understand what ministry and all that meant because I was raised Catholic, and priests don't have wives, right? So he sat me down one day and he said, listen, if we get married, that means you're going to be a pastor's wife. And I said, well, what do they do? What do pastors' wives do? I don't even know that. He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, you'll learn as you go. Just trust me, follow me. And I did trust him, and I did follow him. We ended up getting married 18 months after we met, which was very quick and not going according to my plan at all. But he was very persistent. And bottom line, he was going to be in the ministry, and he wanted to have sex. And going for the ministry, you don't have sex before marriage. So he was like, we either got to get married or break up. And I said, I'm way too young. I'm not ready for that. And there's no way. And so I moved away. I moved an hour away, thinking this will all end. He will lose interest. And because I did feel like I was falling in love with him, but I thought I'm just way too young. I'm not ready for this. And so I moved away down to live with my dad, thinking I'll work down there. I changed jobs. And he said, well, I'm going to come visit you every weekend. And I said, oh, yeah, right. Well, he did. He kept his word. And that impressed me. It blew my mind. And especially because he, at that time, was working graveyard at a grocery store. So he would go to work at midnight, get off at 7 a.m, drive an hour to come visit me with no sleep and hang out with me all day long. We would just hang out, and then he would go back to work that night. And that I was like, you are crazy. You are crazy. You've had no sleep. And he did it like every weekend. And he said he would. And I thought, this guy's crazy. And he really likes me. So I was impressed by that. Anyway, he eventually he and my sister convinced me to move back. And I did. I went to school up there. And again, 18 months later, we were married because I just gave in. And he kept saying, we've got to get married. And I said, okay. He was very persistent. But I was nervous about it because we were young. I was 19. He was 22. And once I met the Lord, started learning about the Bible, and then married my husband, very shortly after that, I got pregnant. It changed my life. I mean, I really was converted. It changed my life. And I started seeing the world totally different. I saw marriage different. Ooh, I'm supposed to put that on. No ringing. And I started seeing men and women's roles differently. And I feel like I learned how to be a wife from the church, from the Bible. And we were surrounded with a lot of young couples, and we had a lot of accountability. My husband, whenever we would come to a standstill in an argument, we always had older people around us. And again, we were young. My husband became the youth pastor at the church. So we were very involved and had lots of Christian people around us speaking into our lives, and lots of mentors and teachers. And whenever we would come to a standstill, I would always say, and I always tell young women this, don't marry a man that doesn't have older men in his life that he respects, that he looks up to, that will hold him accountable. And because those men, if they're good, healthy men, will advocate for the woman. And I would always say, if we couldn't make a decision and we were in an argument about something, I would say, let's go talk to our pastor. And if I am wrong, I'll stand down. But if you're wrong, you stand down. And honestly, I don't think we ever had to do that, because for a young man, he wanted those men's respect. And he'd be like, no, we can figure it out. We can figure this out on our own. And I'd say, okay. And usually, I was right and he was wrong. But anyway, I'm kidding. Not always. But yeah, there's just, he was young. He was, I, of course, at the time thought he was so mature. He was 3 years older than me, just because I'd never met a man like him. I'd never met a man that was so well-versed spiritually, and we could talk, and he was very emotionally intelligent, and we could talk about anything for hours and hours. And so I trusted him. And so being married, being a young mom, I had to learn how to do that. I read everything I could get my hands on, every book on relationships and marriage and child rearing, because I wanted to do it right. And, as adults, we tried to right whatever was wrong in our childhood, right? And I knew that we were getting married young, and I did not want to be divorced. And coming from a divorced family, and we were on the same page. We had the same values. And I said, we will do whatever it takes to have a good, healthy, happy marriage. I'm not going to be in marriage for 50 years and be miserable. It's going to be happy. So we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure we do our own personal self-development. And so I've always been passionate about marriage and family and raising kids and having fun and faith and freedom and fitness, all that stuff. So that's how I got interested.
You said a lot I want to unpack. The first thing you said that really struck me was when you said he kept his word, and I was impressed by that he said he was going to come see you every weekend. Talk a bit about that specifically for him, and then general in a macro sense, why women respect men that keep their word.
Well, because it makes women feel safe. If you're going to be in an intimate relationship, then you want to be in an intimate relationship with someone who can match your healthiness, your emotional maturity, right? And he could. And in ways, he was more mature than me in a lot of ways. And other ways, I was more mature than him. But we kind of grew. I feel like we kind of grew together. But when a man keeps his word, when he says he's going to do, when he does what he says he's going to do, when he says he's going to be there at a certain time and he shows up, when he says he's going to call and he does, it makes her feel like she can trust him. And when she can trust him, it says he's loyal. He's a man of good character. He keeps his word. He does what he says. And that takes a discipline to do that. And so for a woman to feel safe with a man, she's got to have a man that that does what he says, bottom line, who pays his bills on time, who takes responsibility, who goes to work even when it's hard, even when he doesn't feel like it. And man who keeps his word does all those other things too.
I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on this, because these are topics I talk to with men. And it's good when I hear a woman's perspective on this.
Yeah.
And it's really beautifully put, and it's very succinctly and powerfully put as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
The other thing that you said, which I thought was powerful, is that you accepted, Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior into your life. I'm a Christian myself. Not everyone who listens to the podcast is, but why was that important? And why was it important for you to be with a man who obviously also felt the same way, given that, became a pastor?
Well, I thought I knew Jesus. Okay. And I had a girl that I worked with that was always asking me on her break. She would always had her Bible open. And as Catholics, you're not really taught to read your Bible. At least we weren't. I did all the catechism, confirmation, communion, all that stuff, all my growing up years. But we weren't taught to read the Bible. And so this girl would always have her Bible open. And she'd always say, hey, if you ever want me to pray with you. And I was like, no. I already know God. I know that Jesus is the Son of God. I'm a believer. Like, you don't need to pray with me. And I was living a party lifestyle. I mean, again, I was, from the time I was 16, I think I had a fake ID and going out to the clubs and dancing and starting to dabble in drinking and those things. And I liked my life. I thought I had a great life. And I remember saying to her, I don't want to change anything. So why would I do what you're saying and pray when I feel like Jesus already is in my heart? I don't want to change anything. And she said to me, and I'll never forget her words, and she said, oh, you don't have to change a thing. And I said, I don't? Because I would come into work after a very late night partying, and she would see me, and I'd be, drinking the coffee and trying to do my job. And so she knew but she never judged me. And I said, I don't have to change anything. Like, I don't have to quit drinking. I don't have to quit partying. And she goes, no, once Jesus comes into your heart, like truly comes into your heart, you give your life to him, he does the changing. And I thought, okay, all right, I'm going to try it. If I don't have to change anything, that I'm a little bit more open to that. And so I remember one day saying to her, I felt like I was fine, but I was concerned about my older sister, and she was very high strung and very emotional and had lots of highs and lows. And I was nervous about her. And I went to her and said, hey, Angela, we're going to go pray with this girl, and we're going to give our lives to God. And I felt like I'm just doing it for my sister. I'm taking one for the team. So we both did. But I before we even did that, and let me back up. I remember one night driving home from my dad's house from Newport Beach, driving back inland, which is an hour. And he and I had a conversation that night. And he was telling me that somebody was also witnessing to him about God at the same time. And now my dad was a full-blown alcoholic, but a very functional, very wealthy, successful man. And he sat there and talked to me with his Bible open, which I'd never seen him do before, with his Jack Daniels. And while he was drinking, and he started telling me about the end times and about the book of Revelations. We're never taught that in the Catholic Church either. And I remember driving home that night in my Volkswagen on the freeway. It was nighttime. And I said, man, God, if you're real and this rapture thing is going to happen, I don't want to be left behind. I want to go. And right then, something lit up around me. And I remember having these chills from my head to my toes. And I'm driving on the freeway and I go, what is going on? Why does it seem bright? And I felt these chills, and it was but it was this warm feeling, I didn't know what had happened. I was just like, this is bizarre. So the next day is when I went to my friend and said, hey, I want to pray that prayer. I think I actually got saved that night in my car, but I didn't know it. And I had never heard the verse, when Jesus comes into your heart, a light goes on. I'd never heard that until I started reading the Bible, and I was like, oh, that's what happened to me. And it talks about the veil being lifted from your eyes, the blindness, the veil being lifted. And I think that's what happened to me. That veil was lifted. He came into my heart that night. We prayed the next day. I felt nothing with my sister and my friend. And from then on, it was probably, I'm going to say just very few, maybe a month after that, where a friend introduced me to Steve, and I didn't really give him a second look. I was like, oh yeah, fine. He has a Bible in his hand. We were at a wedding, and it was a wedding of mutual friends. And my sister said, hey, this is that guy, Steve Hage. And he's the one that I always hear his name because he's like totally into the Bible, and he's a Christian, and he had this reputation. And I met him, and I just turned around and walked away, didn't think anything. And then I met him again after I got saved, and he started telling my sister and I about the Bible and just answering all our questions. And we had a lot of questions because, again, we had a little bit of knowledge, but not a lot. And so he would come over like once a week and hang out and just talk to us. And he was so interesting. I just found him so interesting. And he had such a great sense of humor. He was very confident in who he was, where he was going. A man with a plan is very attractive. And his confidence gave me confidence in listening to him and following him and doing what he said. So that, I think, meeting the Lord was imperative for me to be able to submit to a man because I didn't really trust a lot of men just because my dad wasn't there. And my dad, even though he was a decent person, he had a very loud voice, and he could be scary at times, and especially when he was drinking. Never hit me, never abusive, but just scary. So I was a little bit leery about putting my life into another man's hands, and because I thought I would never do that. But again, who he was, and he had such a good heart and such good character, I was able to trust.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to unpack was you said you learned how to be a wife from the Bible. Say more about that.
Well, where it talks about probably the biggest scripture that women get hung up on is submit to your husband, right? And a lot of women say, I will never submit to a man. And I understand if it's a man that is not kind to you and doesn't treat you well. And we don't have to submit to any man, just any man. We don't have to submit even to a boyfriend. We are to submit to our husbands, okay, once you're married. But the loophole for that is if a man is asked you to do anything that is outside of God's word or doesn't line up with the word of God, because God has your back. He's got our best in mind, and he would never mistreat a woman. God loves women. Submission isn't to disempower or invalidate or rob a woman of her voice. Okay. It's not about that. And I think a lot of people misunderstand the word. But to be able to do that, I needed to know that that's what the Bible said. And this Bible gives us a prescription for marriage. Right before that verse, it says you're to submit to one another. So it's not just the woman submitting to the man. We submit to one another. But at the end of the day, if we're at a standstill and we can't decide and we're not in agreement, I will defer to him. And I will say to him, I'm not in agreement with that decision. So this is on you, but I am going to defer to you because you're the man and I'm the woman. And I'm going to follow you because I trust you. And I don't even trust your decision, but I trust the God in you. So you go. And every time I've ever said that to him, he comes back and goes, okay, now wait a minute. Because that's a lot of pressure to put on one person. And he doesn't want to lead me astray. So he'd come back and go, okay, now wait a minute. Tell me again your perspective on this situation. And maybe we need to get an outside perspective. But I would just say, at the end of the day, like my husband always says, we argue or communicate as equals, even argue as equals. But at some point, he has the final decision. And honestly, I've been married 44 years. And I can say maybe 5 times in 44 years have we not been in unity over something. Maybe. And because we talk about it until we get in agreement. Usually we won't make any major decisions until we're both in agreement. But there have been times where I've had to say, okay, I don't know about this, but I didn't necessarily have a better way. I just wasn't sure what to do. So I'd say, okay, I'll go with you on this one.
Wow, that's pretty wild. I'm originally from Iran. I'm from the Middle East.
Oh.
And my family is a Christian family in Iran, which is one of the reasons why we left after the Islamic Revolution. But
yeah,
I can tell you, people here just, they often say, well, women there have no rights and the men are in charge and it's a patriarchal society. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, really? You ever lived there? Oh, no, you haven't. All right. I was going to say, all right, well, I have. Well, let me explain something to you. In our house in Iran, growing up, Dad worked, made the money, and was officially the head of the family, and Mom deferred to him. But isn't it interesting that we went to the schools Mom picked for us? Isn't it interesting we went and did swimming lessons, horseback riding lessons, because Mom wanted that? And when the Islamic Revolution took place, isn't it interesting that Mom picked the country we moved to? And I just thought to myself, every major decision in our family was driven by my mother. Every single
one. Wow.
And, she deferred to him, especially in public, but that was a strong woman. She had definitive ideas about how she wanted her children to be raised. And her husband saw it as his job to let her do that.
Well, he respected her. Yeah, I mean, he really respected her, which is awesome.
She picked the homes that we lived in. Yeah. She bought the food we ate.
Right.
It was all Mom.
Because the women, I like to say it like this, the men are the gatekeepers of the family. They're the protectors, the providers, right? They're the gatekeepers, but the women are the caretakers or caregivers. They want to make sure everything is healthy. Because we are more in tune with our emotions generally. And so we can see, I always say, I'm a preventative maintenance girl. I'm going to take care of anything that I see could be a problem down the road. And if I see us going in a certain direction, or we're not talking, or maybe resentment's building or something, I'm like, let's sit down and talk about this right now. We don't just brush crap under the carpet. We are going to talk about it, fight it out if we have to, until we come to a resolve. And I think women, they are into the health of their children. They're the ones that, are creating the meals and like you say, picking the schools. My daughter is also married to an Iranian man, and they have 2 sons, and she is in full charge of the kids, everything. But he is in full charge of the finances. And she told him when they got married, because a lot of Iranian women here in our country, they work full-time jobs too. And there's, 2 incomes, all their friends, both the men and the women, wife and husband work. And my daughter said to him, I want you to know, and she's a worker, she always worked, but she said, when I have children, I'm going to stay home with my kids. So before we get married, you need to sign off on that. Is that okay with you? Because I want to be there. I'm not going to farm my kids out to childcare and to nannies. I'm going to raise them. And he said, absolutely. And so she has been a stay-at-home mom, and he works his butt off. He's a fireman, and he works his behind off, but she is very respectful of him. He has his role, she has hers. Whenever it comes to the kids, she'll say, this is what they want, or this is what they're doing. And he kind of gives the okay, but she runs it. So yeah, I think that's it. The women, they are the ones that are taking care of the family, even though the man is ultimately in charge, but the women kind of rule the home, they have their finger on the pulse of the home life, so to speak.
So you also said, and I think this is an important point to expand on, to young women, don't marry a man who doesn't have good older men in his life that he respects to take advice from, like elders, mentors, teachers. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Frankly, it's why we created Sovereign Man. So tell me why you believe that's important.
Because when you say yes to marry somebody, you have to look at what's around them. What kind of relationships do they have? And are they submitted somewhere? Is a man, it's not just the woman submitting to a man. I would never submit to a man that wasn't submitted to God. I would never submit to a man that wasn't submitted to older men around him, whether it be a father, a teacher, a coach, a pastor, a employee, somebody he really looks up to. And I know for me, my husband had a lot of men in his life, and he wanted their approval. And again, because he was planning on being full-time in the ministry, they were his mentors. And so I knew that was a good thing, because I knew if those were good men, that they wouldn't just side with my husband, that they would take me into account also. And so I think for women, like when I coach women, and I'll say, well, who does your boyfriend or your husband respect? And a lot of times they go, I don't know anybody they respect. Really? Like, that's a red flag. There's got to be somebody older than them or has done more than them, somebody that they want to model their life after. And hopefully, if they don't have a man in their life, hopefully they have God in their life, Jesus Christ, because he's a great, role model.
Wow. That's really good. I really like that.
And that also makes a woman feel safe. It's all about her safety. She's got to feel safe with her man. And him having other people, elders around him, brings her safety.
See, one of the great things about having podcasts, and I have 2 of them, is that I get to learn and be coached by my guests. So I take notes. That this conversation's valuable for me personally, and not just, for my listeners.
Yeah.
You also said to me that for you it was important when you got married to really take on being a relationship master, to go in there, learn how to be good at relationship, good at being married, good at child rearing. You were going to do whatever it took to have a healthy, happy marriage, because you were not going to be miserable for 50 years.
And I wasn't going to be divorced.
And you weren't going to be divorced. So I love that. I think this is the best advice you can give to women. Women don't know how devastating divorce is to them. They just have no idea. I'm divorced. I'm with another woman now. We're not married, but we've been together for 14 years almost. And I can tell you that my ex-wife ended up being with another man, and she's not with him anymore. And she's never said this to me, but she works her butt off. And if we were together, she wouldn't need to work this hard. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We have a very good relationship. We raise our 2 sons together. One boy's 18, the other one's 16. And I go out of my way to make sure that she feels like she's got me as someone that she can count on. But I look back on it and I go, I wish I had what it took to be able to keep our marriage together, because I think it would have been better for her, better for everybody. I think the biggest lie that women were sold in the 60s was, no, divorce the guy. This is a good idea. This is, you're going to be liberated. You're going to be free. It is the worst thing a woman can do to get divorced. The worst for her in the long run.
Yeah. And I understand, because I constantly get comments on social media saying, well, that's great, but you must not have ever been with a narcissist. And I always say, my information does not apply to people with personality disorders, mental disorders, sociopaths, abusers, drug addicts, alcoholics. It doesn't apply to unhealthy people. Like, none of what I say is going to work with someone who's that unhealthy, has some kind of addiction or weird thing going on. And I would never tell a woman to stay with a man who was abusive or mistreated her in any way. And a lot of women, and I know they say that women file for divorce more. I just heard a very successful divorce attorney say, he goes, this is what it looks like. He goes, yes, more women file, but this is why. They come to me and they say, my husband had an affair, or he's living with another woman, and we have our mortgage and he's not paying it. And I never worked because I stayed home with the kids. What do I do? And the attorney said, the only way you can make him pay is if you file for divorce. She's like, I don't want a divorce. I just want my husband to come home. But what is her hands are tied, but she has to have some income. And if she's been raising the kids and stayed at home and he's out philandering around and not taking care of his responsibilities, then she's going to file. So I think a lot of women, I don't think women want to be divorced. I coached one couple. The man hired me and he said, I want you to talk to my ex-wife. She's taken our 4 kids and she's left. And I said, first of all, why would any woman with 4 small children leave a marriage? And he didn't tell me the truth. And I knew it. I thought, no, there's got to be a really good reason. He goes, well, I don't know. And I said, well, why don't you ask her? And he goes, well, I did. And he showed me her text. Well, the other marriages, and you were abusive, and you mistreated the children. I said, you don't know why she left you? And then I got on the phone with her, on the call that he paid for with her, and she broke it down to me. And I said, why does your ex-husband want me to talk to you? Does he think I'm going to convince you to go back with him? She goes, yeah. I said, no, I'm not. The courts ruled in her favor for good reason. He was abusive. He married 3 other women while he was here in the United States. They're Islamic, of the Islamic faith. And she said, when we go to America, that's not okay with me. It's me and you, or, you don't get to have extra wives. And he did it anyway. I said, but that's not even legal here. So I don't know if it was actually legally done, but he was with 3 other women, said he was married to 3 other women. Didn't tell me that, of course. And I'm like, yeah, no, I would never tell her go back to him. No. She had every right to walk out, and every reason. And these are I always say these are the 3 main reasons for divorce: adultery, abuse, and addiction. I know a lot of couples who have overcome all 3. Okay. If your mate is willing to get help and do the hard work of getting healthy, have grace, give them a chance. But if they keep saying they're going to do something over and over and never do it, they're, again, not keeping their word.
There's no question that there's men that are idiots and do stupid things. But unfortunately,
Right.
there's a fair number of women that are that way too. And
Yes.
a lot of women are being told that once they're married, they have no responsibility. It's all on him to shift and change as well. And it is ridiculous.
No.
I know plenty of men whose wives have basically stopped having sex with them. They've been married together for 30 years. And they're like, well, I don't want to anymore. And these guys are beside themselves, because for us, that's super important. And these women don't seem to understand that it's super important, don't seem to care. And I've seen so many marriages get broken up over this.
Oh, yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, I think that's so sad. And I would like to sit those women down and say, what in the world are you doing? Are you trying to make your husband masturbate in the other room, watch pornography, sleep with another woman? A man has sexual needs. And when you married him, you committed to meet his needs just like he committed to meet yours. And this is the other thing the Bible talks about. It says your body is not your own. When you are married, your body's not your own. And even when you don't feel like having sex, do it anyway. This was probably one of my first videos that hit 1 million. And I couldn't believe it. I thought it was so funny, but it's because there was so much interaction and feedback from both male and females. And I said, somebody said, well, what do you do when, you don't want to have sex or you don't feel like having sex? And I said, do you ever get up in the morning, not feel like working out, not feel like eating, going to the gym, not feel like brushing your teeth? Sometimes we don't feel like eating good and we don't feel like exercising, but we do it. And then when we get there, we're so glad we went. I never leave the gym going, oh, I wish I didn't come, ever. But how many times do I say, darn it, I wish I'd made myself go today? Look at sex like that. At the end of the evening, I mean, you're both going to get a payoff. Hopefully, you both get a payoff. And, orgasms are great. And you're going to be so glad you pleased your man. You got pleased. Now, women will say, oh, but I don't always get pleased. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes you just do quickies. Sometimes I just coached another couple. I said, for you guys, 4 young kids, I said, this is a season of quickies. Okay, kids are sleeping in the bed. I said, do it in the bathroom, do it in the shower, do it in the kitchen, hide in the closet for a minute. Like, have sex anywhere you can. Make it fun. Like, my daughter does that. She's a brand new mommy. And she's going to co-sleep with her infant and her husband and their dog. And she goes, yeah, people say, well, when do you have sex? She goes, Mom, you don't just have sex in the bed at night. We can have sex anytime, anywhere. Baby's taking a nap. Hey, we got 15 minutes. Let's go.
I
And
love
said,
it.
good girl, you know. And of course, the man is like, really? Now? I mean, rarely is a man going to say, nah, I'm not into it. I'm not
Nah,
into
I
it.
don't think so. Yeah, really. Just God.
But yeah, for women to just withhold sex, unless there's a really good reason, and there's got to be a really good reason, and then hopefully she has communicated that to her husband. But I don't understand that. To me, that's just selfish. And what if he withheld safety, withheld protection, withheld provision for you? You wouldn't like that?
What you did is what I think men and women need to do. When you got married, you decided that this was going to be a successful marriage and it was going to last and last and last until death do you part. And you decided to like become a student of relationship, of marriage, of child rearing. And far too many people go into a relationship and they don't become a student of it. They just kind of, okay, we're kind of here. We don't know anything about how to make it work good, but we're here. And I'll let all my selfish neuroses run the day. That's insanity.
Yeah. Yeah. When you get married and see, and this is also understanding what the Bible says. Like if you're first fully submitted to God, both of you were to be imitators of Christ. So if I treat him in any way that Jesus would not treat him, like, you know, you have to ask yourself, is this being a Christian? Everything that comes out of my mouth is supposed to be uplifting and edifying and encouraging. Think on these things, whatever is good, pure, true, wholesome, virtuous. Like that's how we're supposed to be thinking. The Bible gives us a prescription for all of these things. If we, you know, it's not just women submit to your man, it's men love your wives like Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? He sacrificed his life. He laid his life down for the church. That's the bride. And so my husband was willing to sacrifice himself for me. And I could see that in the way he treated me. And I probably honestly fell in love with him because of the way he loved me. I mean, he was just, it was so, he loved me so well. And I've always said that I have been loved well. And a lot of women will say, well, that's good for you. You found love. And it's like, but I had to do my part too. Like, and that's why so much I talk about femininity and masculinity, because women want to change men. They want to make them more passive, more emotional, more sensitive. And it's not that men aren't emotional and sensitive. They just don't talk about their feelings the way women do. They don't, you know, women, our feelings are everything to us. And we can learn from men, from logical men, that we can't be led by feelings. Feelings make terrible leaders. So we have a lot to learn from men. I really believe that. Women, you know, we're multitasking. You guys are single focused. My husband, I'll say something, and I know I'm kind of rambling, but I'll say, oh my gosh, I'm traveling tomorrow. I forgot to pack my charger, my phone charger. When we get home, like we're out to dinner, remind me to pack my charger. And he says, when we get in the house now, I want you to go straight upstairs and grab your charger. I go, well, first I'm going to go and throw the load of laundry into the dryer. And then I've got to do those. And then he'll go, no, go straight upstairs right now and put your charger in your bag. I'm like, yes, dear. Because I probably would forget if I did all those other things first. But see, a man, single focus, remember the charger. Got to do that first on my list. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Right, I'll do that. But and I mean, there's so many examples of that. But why was it? Oh, I was talking about women trying to change men. And my thing is, if we let men be men the way they were created and designed to be, protectors, providers, conquerors, competitive, aggressive. They were designed to meet women's needs. They were designed to make women happy. Not that it's even their responsibility to make women happy. But what I have found is men hold themselves accountable for their wives' happiness. But honestly, we are the only ones that can make us happy. And I know many men that have said, I've done everything for her, everything she asks for. I try to give her everything she wants, and she's still not happy. Every time I feel like I meet their standard and she raises the standard. And I'm like, that's just cruel. That's just cruel. And I talk about women being unhappy on principle, and they do it to manipulate men. I'll be happy when, I'll be happy if. No, how about tell me right now what you're happy about. Tell me all the things, tell him all the things that make you happy right now. All the things that he does. You know, it's like you are responsible for your own happiness, not your husband, not your wife.
Amen. You know, when my woman is being, not so great with me, is when she acts in those manipulative, I'm not happy, nothing's going to make me happy ways. And she brings all her crap to me. And when she's being great, she doesn't do any of that. She walks in the house, takes me by the hand, removes her clothes, removes mine, smiles, and we have a good time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when that's done, the other day, she was with me, and she says, "Well, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this." And she's doing a play right now, and there's like, she's got the lead role in it, and it's her first lead role. She's excited, she's excited, freaked out, putting all her energy and attention. So she calls me and tells me every little freaking thing she needs to do. So I tell her, "You got 15 minutes, honey." She goes, 15 minutes? I go, "Yeah." After 15 minutes, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So good. 15 minutes. So I say, "Okay, go." And then she goes, and 11 minutes in, she goes, "How am I doing for time?"
So cute. I love that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I go, you got 3-4 more minutes, and then it's done. And then it was done. And all this was done. And I said to her, I said, "Look," she said, and I said to her, "Sweetheart, go upstairs, take your clothes off, and get under the covers, and I'll be there in a minute." And she says, "I don't know. I mean, can I talk to you some more?" And I go, "No, you had your 15 minutes. Now it's my turn." Right? And she says, "No, I need to talk some more." Okay, fine, talk some more. And she went up and she did what I asked. And, she, anyways, and then when I was happy, it was all done. And then I came downstairs, and she asked her, "You hungry?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "What would you like?" "Got some eggs," whatever. So, she likes them cooked in a cast iron skillet. I got a John Wayne cast iron skillet. We cooked her the eggs, and I did everything she asked, and blah, blah, blah. And then she said, "From now on, as soon as I come see you, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get that blowjob. Then we'll do everything I want, because you're much more agreeable after that." And I'm like,
and see,
duh.
She met your need. You met her need by letting her talk. For a woman, the way women, and this is something I think men need to understand about women, is, first of all, women have cycles. Okay. They're different every week. Every week they need something different. And a lot of it is because of hormonal things that are going on inside of us that men really don't have to deal with. Okay. So you have to have grace for women for that. The other thing is that women, when they connect verbally. So when she's getting to talk and tell you all the details, that is her connecting with you. And when she feels like you are listening, she feels heard, she feels seen. And when she feels heard and seen, it makes her feel safe. And when she feels safe, it makes her vulnerable to open up, especially in the bedroom, because she feels safe and connected. And she feels like you listen to her. And that's huge. And then she's willing to do whatever you want. And so, like, those women that won't have sex with their husbands, I would like to ask the husbands, do they feel safe? Does your wife feel safe? And if she says no, you need to find out why. Like, what's going on in her? Because if she isn't willing to be vulnerable with you in the bedroom, or open up and even desire sex, it could be her oxytocin levels are low. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. And when a woman is pampered, when she, gets her hair done, gets her nails done, gets a massage, somebody rubs her feet, hopefully her husband, not just anybody, but, a pedicure, whatever, it makes her feel pampered, and that causes oxytocin to be released in her body, which is the very thing she needs in order to nurture and serve and care and please a man. And she has to have enough oxytocin to even desire sex. So if her oxytocin levels are low, she's had no girl time. Like when she's out with her girlfriends and they're all talking. They're all talking at once. You get around a group of women, they're all talking at one time, right? Whenever I get groups of women together, I all say, stop, we're going to take it one at a time because I want to hear all the conversations. I just had a birthday and I had 6 or 7 women come over and everybody, we hadn't seen each other in a while. And everybody's, and I just said, stop. I go one at a time. Whoever has the salt shaker gets to talk. And when you're done giving us an update on your life, your kids, whatever's going on, pass it to the next person. And they laugh, but they love it because they all get listened to and they all get to talk. And so anyway, but that's just, it's a girl thing. And when they exercise, when they mostly, a lot of women, they take the classes, at the gym or whatever, they have their workout buddies, and that's, it releases oxytocin because they're doing something together. When their husband is reading about romance or marriage or relationships or in a class about relationships, it will boost her oxytocin levels. I also, when I hold my classes for men, I always say, plan on having sex tonight. The fact that you're here listening and learning about women, your women are already turned on. Plan on it. You will have sex tonight. And they laugh. But it's true. And men always send women to my seminars. They, over and over, their husbands will go, oh, it's time for a tune-up. You need to go back to her seminar. Because I did these monthly seminars, which I shut down once the pandemic hit. So then we started a podcast. But anyway, I know.
We're remotely as well. They don't need to be in person, but I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So Danielle, where do you want to send people who want to find out about your podcast and your other ways in which you serve couples and people?
Well, right now I'm new at this. We've only been going a little bit over a year. And so I'm just kind of building my community, building my audience. And I really am not selling anything. I will do coaching. Right now they can just DM me on Instagram and I will send a coaching link. But I don't want to coach full time just because that would be all my time. And I really don't want to do just one-on-one all the time. But hopefully I will be starting like webinars and that kind of thing coming up in the near future. And so, yeah, I would just say follow me on I'm on all the platforms, YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Everything is under my name, Daniele Hage. Instagram is Daniele Catherine Hage because my daughter-in-law is Danielle Hage. So sometimes people confuse this. So I go Daniele Catherine Hage. I have 1 L in my name. She has 2. I'm Danielle. She's Danielle. Yeah.
Danielle, we're going to make sure we put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been great. I learned a lot. And I know the men listening to this and the women who care about them will learn a lot from you as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, you bet. And that is a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.